Welcome to the GYSB Talks podcast with host Carla Palmer. GYSB Talks, Get Your Sexy Back Talks, is the #1 podcast helping women in midlife elevate physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, and in relationships. I am so happy and oh so grateful that you are here today and every week. Now, let's get into today's topic, shall we? Hey y'all, hey, Carla Palmer here. Welcome to another solo episode of GYSB, Get Your Sexy Back Talks. I am your host, and today we're going to be talking about motherhood and being a parent of a young adult male. This is kind of a random episode, but it was inspired by something that happened this week. So this week I was recording a podcast episode. Oh, first of all, let me say that I am a mom of a 23-year-old amazing young man who still lives at home for now. He will be moving out soon, but he still lives at home for now, right? And so we share this space, and it's not a big space. So we have to be mindful of what each of us have going on. So he is a music artist, and oftentimes he records a lot of his content, his music and stuff here at the house, right? He has a little studio in the back. And I have my podcast recordings that I do as well. So this week I was recording a podcast episode, and he walked by, and I thought that he had noticed that I was recording. So he starts making all this noise, right? And I'm snapping my finger, like kind of on the low while my guest is talking, thinking that my son would hear me making the noise, signaling it for him to calm it down, right? So he didn't pick up on what I was doing. And so I told my guest, hold on, we'll have to edit this part out. And I start yelling at my son like a crazy woman. Like, you saw me. I'm like yelling. It's so disrespectful, inappropriate. My response was not warranted, not in that way. When I came back to my guest, who happened to be a male, who has sons, who has a wife, and I saw his face, and I'm thinking, oh, how did that look to that person? Right? Couple things happening here. One, I disrespected my son because he wasn't intentionally disrespecting me while I was on the podcast, but I lost it. And it didn't come out right. And so I saw my son's face as well when I'm yelling at him about, why are you making so much noise? And I realized in that moment, looking at my son's reaction to my outburst, looking at my guest's reaction to the way that I am talking to my son, and I'm like, you messed up, Carla. That wasn't the way to handle that. And so I ended up apologizing to my guest about what took place, and we finished the conversation. But then later on, I had to message my son and let him know that I realized that I was disrespectful to him. I realized that he was not doing that intentionally, didn't even realize that I was actually recording an episode. And I apologized. I apologized for my tone. I apologized for speaking to him in that way in front of someone else. This is a man. My son is 23. He is a man, okay? Yes, he still lives at home, but he is a man, and I need to respect him, and I should not speak to him in that way. So I apologized to him, told him that I loved him, asked for forgiveness, and that was how I took care of that situation. I tell that story because I think many of us as parents, we get frustrated, and oftentimes, even if our sons are still teenagers, as single moms, we are raising young men, and the way that we are talking to them, the way that we are treating them, it says a lot. It says a lot, and it, even if they don't realize, it kind of starts to show them how women treat men. And believe it or not, it could impact their relationships. And so being mindful of the way that we are having conversations with our young men, mindful of the way that our tone lands with them. I'll give you another example. One day he came home from work and he works hard. He has a couple of jobs and he's, managing a business as an artist, right? His brand and all of that. And so he forgot to take out the trash and he came home from work late. And I was ready. I was ready to go in because he had left the trash out in the trash can and it was smelling. And I wasn't going to take it out because it's his job to do that as the man living in the house, right? Another touchy situation. So he comes in. The moment he comes in, I go off. I go in on him. You left the trash out. It's stinking in there. Why did you forget that? And he just looks at me. And he says, I just got home from work. Really didn't need to hear that in that way. That yelling to get your message across is not helpful. Yeah, it's not helpful. And as mad as I was, and as my spirit was like, you don't get to tell me what's not helpful. I didn't do all of that. I listened to him. All right. I listened to him for a couple of reasons. One, because he is my son. I love him and he is not a yeller. And it doesn't work well with him. Even when he was little, he didn't like the yelling. Second of all, I'm not married. I don't have a man. That's not my man. But as a mother of a male child who's now a young male, I could learn some things from that, right? I could learn from that. And so I had to respect that. And I said, okay, you have to understand what my expectations are about the trash. And I will respect that you don't want to be yelled at. So let's try to make sure that neither of us get to that place again. All right. So that was a conversation that ended up being okay. The other thing that I want to talk about is when our sons are dating, we have to remember, as much as we might like the young ladies that they're dating, those young ladies are not our friends. All right. Yes, we can be friendly. We can have fun. We can be kind. But the side conversations with the young lady about the relationship with your son, that's off limits. And I've kind of learned that the hard way. Teachable moments. Listen, there are teachable moments. We're always learning as single parents. But yeah, they're not our friends. We can love them. We can, like I said, we can be kind to them. But the conversations about that dating situation and the things that are going on in that relationship, that's off limits. You can talk to your son about that. You can feed into that when you're asked for feedback. But the relationship with the young ladies, I believe, and I have learned that is something that is off limits. Okay. Those discussions about what's going on in that situation, that's their situation. They got to figure that out. And again, if your son comes to you for advice, you can give your son advice, but try to lay off of giving advice to the young lady who is dating your son. What else did I have here? I said my son is moving out soon. He has lived with me since he was a child. He's going to be moving out soon. But, the thing is, when he decided that college wasn't the route for him, which was fine. I had to come to terms with that. It's not my life. He decided he was going to live here, work and go to school. Work and pursue his music career. Great. Well, I put into place that he had to pay rent, not because I needed his money, but because I wanted him to get in the habit of having some skin in the game, living at home with mom and learning how to, pay bills. He has a little bit of rent to pay. And it's not a great deal of rent, but it's rent. And he pays it and he pays it on time. And, we had an agreement with that. And also he has the gas bill. And of course, he pays his own car insurance. He bought his own car. He pays his own telephone bill, like all those things. Like he takes care of himself. But yeah, if your children who are male children and they're over 21, sometimes even over 18, give them some bills to pay around the house. They may not love it, but they will thank you for it later. It's really, really important as moms, as we are helping to raise these young men. I do believe that there needs to be a man in the life somewhere. Of course, my son has an amazing dad, but he's not in the home with us. So I have to, come up with my own way of making sure that I am helping to raise an incredible young man who is going to be a wonderful husband to a wonderful woman at some point in his life, and one who is going to be able to be self-sufficient. So we put that in place. Okay. So that was a good thing. The other thing that I did, sorry, I keep sweating. The other thing that I did when he was younger, we had a neighbor, Sue. Hi, Sue, if you're listening to this episode. We had a neighbor, Sue. Sue was also a single mom. She had a daughter. And I remember one day, Sue came home. She had a bunch of groceries. And my son was little. I think he was probably like maybe 10. And she gets out of the car and she's got these groceries. And we are on our way up the pathway to go back to our house because we were coming home from somewhere. And he walks past Sue and I say, hey, go help Sue with her groceries. He's like, that's not our groceries, mommy. I said, I know, but you help women with the groceries. So go help Sue with her groceries. So he did it. He went and helped Sue get her groceries in. And she always remembered that. And it planted a seed for my son, too, because I remember I was having a yard sale one day and the neighbor across the street, who was a single woman, she didn't have children, but she was a single woman. She came home and my son instinctively went over and helped her with her groceries. He helped her take her groceries into the house. And it was because of how I had taught him to support me when I get the groceries to help Sue with her groceries. And the hope is that he will continue throughout life to help women whenever he sees the help that they need. And that he will be a wonderful husband helping his wife when she needs that kind of help without being asked. Okay. So that was a great thing that I believe that I, instilled in him, and also to get up and ask women if they want to sit down, offer your seat when there are no other seats for women to sit in, whether you're on a bus or in a venue, not if you bought a ticket, like a seat, but if there is no seat for a woman to sit down, please offer your seat to women. And I have always gotten compliments about my son and his behavior and the way that he handles himself in front of women and around, women of any age. I don't necessarily love the language in his rap music. There's only so much I can do, right? But know that when you do hear some of the lyrics in his rap music, it's just the industry. He's a good guy. He's a great guy. And he does respect women. The women who have been in his life as far as like dating, he's always been very kind to them. And I'm very proud of the young man that he has become. Did I leave anything out? Oh, here's something else. Always lift your sons up as far as their appearance, as far as their intellect. Don't talk down to them. And I say that, and it's so important. I noticed my son had been getting his hair cut for, a few years by the same barber, right? I didn't necessarily love the turnout of the haircut. And he would go get his hair cut. He would come home. Soon as he would walk in the door, guess who would have something to say? Me. Something to say that wasn't always great. It was like I was going in on the whole haircut, from back to front to edges to part. I always had something to say. And I didn't notice how much it was impacting him and probably his self-esteem until he came home one day, probably like a year ago. He came home and he had his hoodie on. And I said, hey, didn't you just go get a haircut? He was like, yeah. I was like, well, let me see. He was like, I'm good. I said, let me see your hair. He said, Mom, I'm good. And I said, is it because I always have something negative to say? And he was like, always got something negative to say. And I said, oh my goodness. Finally, I'm waking up to why this man don't want to show me his haircut. And I got it. I understood it. Like if you don't have anything nice to say, and I like my hair, Like, just shut up. He didn't say that, but I was thinking that to myself, like, you don't get to weigh in on this man's haircut every time he comes home. He likes it, then you need to love it. Same for his outfits. He and I don't have the same fashion sense. I like a certain kind of style. He likes another kind of style. And at some point, I had to shut up about what he was wearing and stop making comments that were unsolicited because it was impacting him and it was impacting our relationship. Like, you got to learn to read the room. You got to learn to let people evolve and be who they are and show up the way that they want to show up if they feel good and confident about that. And my negativity, my critiques constantly were affecting him. So moms, let's not do that. Let's be aware when we are doing that and let's dial it, reel it in. Okay, let's do that. Let's make sure that we do that. Did I hit all of the points? I did. I hit all the points that I wanted to hit in this short episode. But I'm glad I did this episode. And you know what? If you know any other single moms, share it out. Share this episode with them. They're small tips, but they're helpful. And I think that it will help other moms be mindful of our tone, of what we are speaking into our sons' lives. We had this really great neighbor back in the day. His name was Brazil. And every time my son would come out of the house for school in the morning, Brazil was outside next door. And you know what he would say to my son every single morning? Good morning, Mr. President. Have a good day at school. And my son would light up. He would light up every morning. Good morning, Mr. President. Hey, Mr. President. If he saw him later after school, hey, Mr. President, I hope you had a good day at school. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Hey, Mr. President. 3 words, but they were powerful. My son knew he was smart. My son knew he could do anything that he put his mind to, and he is still the same way to this day. Does, he struggles sometimes with, I don't know. Yeah, we all do. But deep down inside, my son knows he could be the president of the United States if he wanted to be. Because Brazil told him when he went to school every morning, hey, Mr. President, that kid lit up. Okay? So anyway, speak life, speak love, have a beautiful tone as much as possible, even when you're frustrated. Think about how your words are going to land. Think about that. Think about how your words are going to land, how that's going to impact your relationship. Now, go ahead and be the parent because you're going to always be the parent, right? And yes, I've been on this earth for almost 52 years. So I have been there, done that, seen a few things. But it doesn't mean that it has to come out in a way that is disrespectful and negative, right? It doesn't have to come out that way. I'd love to hear what you think. There is going to be a Q&A section at the bottom here of the podcast. Please share your thoughts. Again, share out this podcast episode. Share out the podcast. This podcast is for women in midlife, as Gen Xers, women who are sometimes over 60, 70. This podcast is for us to continue to grow and elevate and to live our best lives in this second half of life. There's so much more life to live, okay? There is always something that we need to improve upon. There are always ways that we can think through things that we are doing and how we might do them differently to have a greater impact. Let's elevate together. If you want to continue to stay connected with me, you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube at GYSB Movement. If you want to email me, you can email me at gysbmovement@gmail.com. I would love to stay connected. If you haven't yet followed the podcast, please click the follow button. Please. I am trying to grow this podcast, and the way that I do that is by you commenting in the comment section and actually following the podcast, sharing it out, turning on notifications, and sending me an email. Let me know what you want to hear on the podcast, okay? Until the next time, take care of yourself, and I will see you soon. GYSB, baby. Take care. All content on this podcast and any linked blog, podcast, webinar, course, or video material is created and produced for informational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal circumstances or complete health objectives. Do not use this content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional based on our content here on this podcast. If you have questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a medical professional.